On what's trending now. From global developments to everyday culture, we're diving into the stories that matter. This is News Generation.
아리랑 아라리요 아리랑 고개로 넘어간다 힘껏 달려라 멈추지 마라 세상 끝까지 가자 아리랑 아리랑 아라리요
In our headlines on this Monday, March 16th, here in South Korea, taking to a social media platform, U.S. President Donald Trump claims countries will send warships to patrol the Strait of Hormuz and then calls on a number of nations, including South Korea, to do so. And Trump claims victory against Iran, adding that the regime, quote, wants to make a deal badly. But Iran's top diplomat refutes this claim, asserting that Iran remains committed to defense. KPop Demon Hunters ends the 2026 awards season in the U.S. this past Sunday with 2 Academy Awards, one for Best Animated Feature Film and another for Best Original Song. South Korea is among a number of nations that U.S. President Donald Trump has named to help secure the Strait of Hormuz amid the unrest in the Middle East. Our Park Jun-han starts us off today.
U.S. President Donald Trump is expanding his diplomatic push to secure and protect the Strait of Hormuz, reaching out to 7 nations instead of the original 5 he mentioned on Saturday, which were South Korea, China, Japan, France, and the United Kingdom. Reports say Trump is trying to build a broader international coalition to reopen the strait and bring the war with Iran to a close. While Trump did not specify which countries he had contacted or whether they had agreed to assist, he said on Sunday aboard Air Force One that we will remember if any decline.
We are talking to other countries about working with us for the policing of the strait. And I think we're getting good response. If we do, that's great, and if we don't, that's great too.
South Korea's government gave a cautious response, with the Blue House saying it is closely communicating with the United States and will carefully review and judge the matter. Officials also noted that the safety of international sea lanes and freedom of navigation serve the interests of all nations. They added that Seoul is closely monitoring the situation in the Middle East and the responses of other countries while considering comprehensive measures to protect Korean nationals and secure energy transport routes. 4 other countries have also shown similarly reserved reactions. Japan said it will make its own independent decision and is not planning any immediate naval deployment. France indicated its ships will remain in a defensive posture in the eastern Mediterranean. The United Kingdom said it is discussing various support options with allies, including possible mine detection equipment, but has not committed to sending warships. China avoided giving a direct answer, only calling for an immediate end to hostilities. 박준환, Arirang News.
Also, prospects of a planned summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Beijing in about 2 weeks have been rendered uncertain as Mr. Trump links that potential meeting to his call for assistance in the Strait of Hormuz. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young explains.
US President Donald Trump says his summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping this month could be postponed if Beijing doesn't help address the Strait of Hormuz crisis. In an interview published by the Financial Times on Sunday, Trump said he wants China to help secure the Strait of Hormuz, a key global energy route disrupted by the ongoing situation in the Middle East. He noted that China depends heavily on oil shipments through the waterway, adding that countries benefiting from the route should help protect it. He said he may delay the trip if China does not take part in the effort, and waiting until the summit would be too late. Trump was largely expected to visit Beijing from March 31st to April 2nd. Preparations are still underway, with senior US and Chinese officials seeking to conclude preliminary talks on potential agreements on agriculture, critical minerals, and new trade mechanisms. Led by US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and China's Vice Premier He Lifeng, the delegations met for more than 6 hours on Sunday at the Paris headquarters of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Sources told Reuters that China has signaled openness to buying more US agricultural products, including poultry, beef, and non-soybean crops. The two sides also reportedly discussed access to Chinese critical minerals used in US manufacturing, including yttrium, a rare earth element used in jet engine turbines. With the technical discussions wrapping up on Monday, the two sides are expected to focus on proposed structures to manage economic ties, including a possible US-China Board of Trade and Board of Investment. While sources told Reuters that the negotiations could lead to proposals for Trump and Xi Jinping to consider at their potential summit, the US president's latest remarks cast uncertainty on whether their talks will take place as scheduled. The talks are also unfolding against the backdrop of new trade friction. China's Commerce Ministry said Monday it has formally protested Washington's decision to launch new Section 301 investigations. Beijing accused Washington of unilateral and discriminatory measures and warned the move may seriously undermine the stability of global industrial and supply chains. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And the government here and the ruling Democratic Party have agreed to release strategic oil reserves over the next 3 months to ease the burden of surging global energy prices. The agreement includes the release of over 22 million barrels of crude oil, an amount earlier coordinated with the International Energy Agency. Authorities are also hammering out this year's first supplementary budget, which they plan to submit to the National Assembly by the end of March as part of countermeasures to address the economic fallout from the conflict in the Middle East. The extra budget largely seeks energy supply stability and small business support. Now, as for the latest regarding the actual confrontation between Washington and Tehran, tough talk continues between the U.S. leader and Iran's top diplomat, with each claiming the upper hand in the military conflict. Our Chung Hae-rim covers the contrasting narratives.
U.S. President Donald Trump is declaring a near-total victory over Iran, claiming American forces have completely decimated Tehran's air defense, navy, and drone manufacturing facilities. Speaking to reporters on Sunday, the president also made striking claims about back-channel diplomacy.
We're talking to them, but I don't think they're ready. So I don't even know that we're going to make it deal. They want to make it deal badly.
However, Iranian officials are claiming otherwise. Speaking on CBS's Face the Nation, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran sees no reason to hold talks with the United States, insisting that Iran has not requested a ceasefire and will continue to fiercely defend itself. The conflicting diplomatic claims come as the multi-front war enters its 17th day. Israel claims to have destroyed over 1,700 Iranian military assets and 100 air defense systems and plans to continue its heavy bombardment for at least 3 more weeks. The Israeli military is also increasing its strikes in Lebanon. Early Monday, a powerful explosion rocked Beirut's southern suburbs as Israel struck at the Hezbollah infrastructure. While there were no immediate reports of casualties, sweeping Israeli evacuation orders have now displaced over 800,000 people across the region. In retaliation, Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it has fired thousands of drones and missiles at U.S. and Israeli targets since the war began. The expanding threat zone forced Dubai International Airport to temporarily halt flights following a drone attack that sparked a nearby fuel tank fire. With both sides locked in a fierce propaganda war alongside the physical battlefield, the path to an actual ceasefire remains highly uncertain. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's first military airlift evacuation has brought home over 200 nationals who had been stranded in the Middle East amid the ongoing unrest. Lee Seung-jae has details.
A South Korean military transport aircraft carrying evacuees from the Middle East arrived in Seoul on Sunday evening, marking the first airlift evacuation using a military plane since the Middle East conflict escalated last month. A KC-330 Cygnus multi-role aerial tanker landed at Seoul Air Base in Seongnam, just south of the capital at 5:59 p.m., bringing home 204 South Korean nationals and 7 foreign citizens from Saudi Arabia.
Now that we've made it out, I think we'll be able to stay safe. I just hope the war ends soon.
The flight was very comfortable and all of the crew members were extremely professional. They were very helpful for us. Yeah, we were originally in Kuwait, so every night that we could hear missiles, and the Korean embassy helped us with a bus to get into Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and then they arranged for this flight. So we're very grateful to the Korean government and everybody at the Korean embassy in Kuwait.
The evacuation mission, codenamed Desert Shine, was launched as thousands of South Koreans remained stranded across the Middle East due to widespread flight disruptions amid the expanding war between U.S.-Israeli forces and Iran. President Lee Jae-myung on Sunday expressed gratitude to government officials and personnel who successfully carried out the operation. In a post on X, Lee said those who had been isolated by the deteriorating security situation returned home safely aboard the military aircraft. He thanked all those who worked around the clock under difficult conditions to ensure the mission's success, calling the evacuation a meaningful achievement made possible through whole-of-government cooperation. The president noted that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of National Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Air Force took part in the effort. South Korean diplomatic missions in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Lebanon also played key roles, alongside the government's Joint Rapid Response Team and the National Police Agency. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In other news, this past weekend here on the Korean Peninsula, North Korea's Kim Jong-un watched a live-fire test of multiple rocket launch systems that he claimed demonstrated the regime's military strength. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung reports.
North Korea conducted a firepower strike drill using 600mm ultra-precision multiple launch rocket systems with the participation of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un accompanied by his daughter Chue, according to the Korean Central News Agency on Sunday. The state-run KCNA reported that long-range artillery units of the Korean People's Army carried out a live-fire strike drill in western areas the previous day using 12 MLRS units manned by 2 artillery companies firing 600mm ultra-precision rockets. Kim Jong-un underlined that the drill was to cause uneasiness among forces hostile to the north, enemies within a 420-kilometer strike range. The media also added the rockets hit an island target about 364.4 kilometers away in the East Sea with an accuracy of 100% and released photos showing the rockets being launched sequentially. One expert said these were clearly to demonstrate forces it could use against South Korea.
By clearly mentioning the target range, North Korea was showing that major South Korean military bases, including the Seoul area, are within range. Firing more than 10 missiles at once is unusual and likely meant to show it could overwhelm missile defenses such as THAAD or Patriot.
Kim was quoted as saying the MLRS would immediately be used as a secondary means for a massive destructive strike in case defense measures fail to prevent foreign forces from launching military provocations or invasions. This comes a day after South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said it detected more than 10 ballistic missiles launched from the Sunan area of North Korea toward the East Sea at around 1:20 p.m. on Saturday. The launches are widely seen as a response to the ongoing U.S.-South Korea joint military exercise Freedom Shield, which began on the 9th. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In LA this past Sunday, K-pop Demon Hunters made history with 2 Oscars at the latest Academy Awards. Our culture correspondent Park Konu has the highlights and more.
And the Oscar goes to K-pop Demon Hunters.
The moment K-pop fans have been waiting for. K-pop Demon Hunters captured the Oscar for Best Animated Feature at the 98th Academy Awards, beating the likes of Zootopia 2 and Alien. Bursting into tears, the film's director had this to say.
And for those of you who look like me, I'm so sorry that it took us so long to see us in a movie like this. But it is here. And that means that the next generations don't have to go longing. This is for Korea and for Koreans everywhere.
Since the voters are active members of the film industry, there could have been different perspectives, but it was recognized for the overall quality as well as its music. The director also stayed true to her cultural identity despite years of challenges and opposition. And the film's success reflects the growing power of K-culture.
The win comes as the animated film has become Netflix's most-watched movie ever since its release in June last year. And that followed a string of major awards for the film and its soundtrack this year, including wins at the Critics' Choice Awards, Golden Globes, and even the Grammys. At the Academy Awards, the film's main song Golden was also a winner, picking up the award for Best Original Song, making it the first K-pop themed music to take home the award.
Growing up, people made fun of me liking K-pop, but now everyone's singing our song and all the Korean lyrics, and I'm so proud. And I realized the song, this award is not about success, it's about resilience. And I'm just so grateful to our team.
EJ, Rayami, and Audrey Nuna, the voices of the animated trio Huntrix, also performed the track live, alongside traditional Korean instruments and dancers. The audience waved light sticks prepared for the event as they cheered along, turning the venue into a scene straight out of the film.
Performances at the Academy Awards are usually presented on a more cinematic scale. The Golden Stage was striking and emotional, particularly for Koreans, and showed a strong understanding and appreciation of K-pop culture.
With K-pop Demon Hunters resonating with global fans and sweeping major awards, attention is now turning to what comes next for K-pop-inspired storytelling on the global stage. Park Konu, Arirang News.
And back here in South Korea, a study program in Jeollabuk-do province is offering children, including those from cities, the opportunity to partake in academic experiences in close-knit communities that balance learning within and beyond the boundaries of classrooms. Our Cho Young-eun files this report.
The day at this rural elementary school in Namwon City, Jeollabuk-do province, begins with movement and laughter. Instead of going to private academies, these children rush to the gym for physical activities. Here, students enjoy skating and skateboarding and escape from academic stress.
All of us really enjoy going outside and inline skating, or riding boards or bikes.
The rural study program in Jeollabuk-do province targets small elementary schools with between 10 and 60 students and offers up to 500,000 won per month in financial support for families moving to the countryside. The number of students at this school rose from 24 to 66 this year. However, limited facilities and housing make it difficult to accept more students who wish to join the program.
Due to limited housing, we were only able to host 4 families, 12 students, which we feel a bit regretful about. Our school will continue to offer programs that keep our students satisfied and meet parents' expectations. We will keep making efforts to maintain an appropriate number of students.
Beyond the classroom, the students explore the village itself, where they are encouraged to connect with the wider community. These elementary school students are visiting the Rural Administrative Center, where they'll meet with community leaders and residents and learn about the village as part of the curriculum. Along the way, they stop to observe nature and learn about living organisms, even watching the principal move a beehive from a building. Students also show curiosity about rural life, asking questions and talking with official workers and even the city mayor. After school, we followed 2 children whose family came from Seoul to join the rural study program this semester. For now, they are staying at a village community center as permanent housing has not yet been arranged.
We initially applied for a 2-year stay, but we're also considering continuing through middle and high school. In Seoul, we hardly knew who lived next door, but here, the residents feel like one big family.
For many families, the rural study program is more than a temporary experience. It is a chance to rethink what education and community can look like. 조영은, Arirang News, Namwon.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. Israeli officials on Sunday announced plans for direct talks with Lebanon to secure a permanent ceasefire that would lead to Hezbollah being disarmed. This follows 2 weeks of renewed fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. In that time, more than 800 people have been killed in Lebanon and hundreds of thousands have been displaced. While Beirut is currently forming a delegation, Lebanese officials are seeking confirmation that Israel will abide by a full ceasefire to facilitate negotiations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday released a video of himself at a Jerusalem cafe to debunk rumors of his death aired by Iranian state. The footage features Netanyahu talking with an aide while using humor and a pun about his love for coffee to dismiss the rumors. Reuters confirmed the video's location and timing. It is a rare public outing for the Israeli leader since the start of the war on February 28th. Strict emergency protocols remain in effect across Israel, banning public gatherings and keeping the majority of the population at home. The Republic of Congo held a presidential election on Sunday, widely expected to grant 82-year-old Denis Sassou Nguesso a 5th consecutive term in power. The incumbent faces 6 challengers in the presidential race. During the election, authorities restricted traffic in the capital Brazzaville and shut down the internet. Despite holding vast oil reserves, the Republic of Congo has extreme youth unemployment and massive international debt. Official results of the election will arrive within the next 14 days. Formula One and the FIA on Sunday officially announced the cancellation of the Bahrain Grand Prix and the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix due to security risks from the Iran war. Both host nations suffered strikes during the recent regional conflict, prompting officials to prioritize the safety of the racing community. Announcing the decision ahead of the Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai, F1 confirmed it would not seek replacement venues for the 2 April slots. This leaves a 5-week gap in the World Championship schedule until the Miami race in May. F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali described the move as a necessary precaution given the volatile situation in the Middle East. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
Hello, I'm Lee Jung-min, and I'll be presenting the weather forecast starting from today. Today's air quality remains poor due to high levels of fine dust that flowed across the country yesterday. Across much of the country, ultra-fine dust levels will remain high and combined with fog in some areas. This will reduce visibility. It was a chilly start to the day with sub-zero temperatures in some regions, but these will rise across through the afternoon. Tomorrow morning will still feel quite chilly. Many inland areas will start the day at near or below freezing. Seoul will begin the day at 2 degrees, Chuncheon -2, and Daejeon 0 degrees. Highs will rise to 15 degrees in Seoul, Gwangju, Daegu, Busan all topping out at 17 degrees. Some sporadic rain will also be experienced. The rain will mostly taper off by tomorrow night. However, on Jeju Island, showers may linger into early Thursday morning. For the rest of the week, we'll continue to see typical early spring weather with large temperature swings. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Those are the headlines at the hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session. And today we touch upon North Korea's latest demonstration of defiance, despite hopes for dialogue here on the Korean Peninsula. Do stay with us.
서양 요리는 오직 하나의 주인공을 위한 무대입니다. 완벽하게 계산된 정무라 같죠. 그런데 한식은 밥과 찬이 어우러져 완성되는 한상이 더 중요해요. 마치 자연을 한 폭에 담은 풍경을 같달까요?
요리사인 저도 한국 음식에 대해서 제대로 모르는 거예요.
향이 미쳤다.
저도 맛보고 싶어요. 알면 알수록 과학적이고 이렇게 하면 할수록 제가 더 빠져드는 거예요.
온다. 엄청 왔다. 같이 여행을 한번 떠나보시죠.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colors, grab an apron. It's the best defense against oil splatter and smoke. Step 2. Bottomless side dishes. Basic side dishes at a barbecue restaurant. Eat, and eat as much as you want. Side dishes come with free refills. Oh, and if you don't see this sign, just ask, 사장님, 여기 밑반찬 좀 더 주세요. Simple, isn't it? Step 3. Grilling meat. There are various kinds of samgyeopsal in Korea. Place the meat on the grill. Turn it over when golden. And again when it looks done. Again and again and again. Step 4. Sam style. You aren't taking bites of sam like a taco, are you? In Korea, we have it in one bite. A pro tip here, add only as much as you can handle in a bite. Gotta avoid awkward situations. Step 5. Enjoy the perks. After the meal, enjoy the perks offered as a Korean restaurant. Fabric refreshers get rid of the barbecue smell, while mint candies freshen your breath. Did you survive the barbecue restaurant? Hang on. Are you here with someone you want to impress? Then let's skip the garlic. Who knows what will happen?
This past weekend here on the Korean Peninsula, North Korea's Kim Jong-un watched a live fire test of multiple rocket launch systems that he claimed demonstrated the regime's destructive capability. With more on Press Perspective today. Hope your work week is off to a good start. It's Monday, March 16th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we turn the spotlight onto shows of strength, if you will, here on the Korean Peninsula, as South Korea and the U.S. conduct their annual joint exercises, while North Korea test fires a series of ballistic missiles. For more on this, I have independent journalist Kelly Kasulis-cho here in the studio. Kelly, it's great to have you here.
Honored to be here, as always.
I also have Professor Park Won-gon at Ewha Women's University live on the line. Professor Park, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Kelly, let's start here in the studio. So as I mentioned, North Korea launched a series of ballistic missiles this past weekend. Let's start with details on that, as well as South Korea's response, of course.
On Saturday, North Korea launched more than 10 ballistic missiles, according to South Korea's military, into the East Sea. I will say, coming from American media, traditionally, at this point, the United States does not tend to pay much attention to these from a media perspective unless they're intercontinental ballistic missiles. So for people who don't know, those are the ones that have a much farther range, could reach potentially the continental United States. You know, this came at a time where South Korea and the United States were conducting routine joint military drills. It also comes around the time that the Prime Minister of South Korea met with President Trump in Washington, and they discussed some potential dialogue with North Korea. So on one hand, it comes off as a little routine. On the other hand, decades into this war, or the stalemate, so to speak, military people, analysts, they pay attention to these kinds of provocations.
Right. Professor Park, in recent times, there have been questions about whether or not Seoul and Washington need to adjust their combined exercises and other aspects of their alliance's posture to complement outreach to Pyongyang. What are your thoughts?
Well, the reason we hear this argument that the United States and South Korea should adjust their combined military exercise is mainly because North Korea strongly demanded it. In fact, North Korea often presents the suspicion of this exercise as precondition for dialogue, especially with the United States. For example, at the 9th Workers' Party Congress, Kim Jong-un said that if the United States respect what he called the current status of DPRK and abandon its hostile policy, then there is no reason the two countries cannot have better relations. When the North Korea talks of the hostile policy, it usually means two specific things. First, the combined military exercise between U.S. and South Korea, and second, the deployment of the U.S. strategic assets, such as nuclear bombers, aircraft carriers, or nuclear submarines around the Korean Peninsula. We saw the same pattern during the 2018 and 2019 summit between Kim Jong-un and Trump. At the time, North Korea repeatedly asked for the suspension of joint military exercise and the reduction of strategic asset deployment. So from the North Koreans' perspective, these activities are serious security concern. But from the perspective of South Korea and the United States, the exercise play a very important role. They are essential for military readiness and deterrence. In other words, the fact that North Korea dislikes them so much actually shows how effective they are as deterrent. The bigger problem is that even if the United States and South Korea suspend or scale back this exercise, there is no guarantee that North Korea would improve relations with South Korea, and mostly it might open the door to dialogue with the U.S. And there is another even more difficult condition that North Korea has raised. Kim Jong-un said the United States should respect the current status of North Korea written in its constitution. But today, North Korea's constitution clearly defines the country as a nuclear weapons state. So essentially, North Korea is asking the international community to accept it as a nuclear power and then negotiate arms control rather than denuclearization.
Right. And Kelly, as you mentioned earlier, prior to Saturday's missile launches by North Korea, South Korean Prime Minister Kim Il-suk and US President Donald Trump met in Washington, D.C. to talk about possible dialogue with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Could you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, well, according to South Korea's account of those conversations, President Trump, reportedly patted himself on the back for the summitry of 2018. It's almost, 10 years now. I was there at the time. It was very exciting, but, the situation is essentially the same since then in terms of, the United States' goal of, denuclearizing North Korea and North Korea's goal of keeping its, sovereignty and its nuclear program, if you will. But he also expressed that he is the only one in the West that can deal with this problem. He also expressed that, I think the quote was, it would be good if he could meet with Kim Jong-un again. These kinds of off-the-hand or off-the-cuff remarks from President Trump expressing interest in meeting with North Korea are certainly not new. The first time around when President Trump had these summits with North Korea, no matter how you feel about it, it was pretty clear that it was a way to show off and that President Trump has since continued to brag about his relationship with the North Korean dictator. The other thing to point out, I think, is, while the U.S. might be open to dialogue, it's unclear whether North Korea actually would. North Korean state media has essentially suggested that it has no interest in speaking with South Korea, which is clearly one of the most important players in this conflict. And I believe the KCNA also put out a statement saying essentially that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un would be interested if the United States could just accept its nuclear program. I'm not a full-time expert on North Korea, but being a reporter on it for 10 years, I find that somewhat unlikely to happen, at least officially. The other thing to point out, I think, is while Trump says things like this, the United States is very distracted with what's going on in the Middle East, as well as numerous domestic problems. It's unclear whether Trump expressing interest in speaking with North Korea really means it's at the top of his agenda, and the truth is likely not at this moment.
Right. Professor Park, with regard to what Mr. Trump has said, do you believe that he is one of the very few leaders who can actually break the deadlock with North Korea? And do you suppose a bilateral meeting is likely in the near future?
Well, yes, I do think President Trump is probably one of the very few leaders who might be able to meet Kim Jong-un and try to break this current deadlock. In both Republicans and Democratic parties of the United States, it's actually hard to imagine another U.S. president being as willing as Trump was to meet Kim directly. We already saw this during his first term when Trump held 3 meetings with Kim Jong-un between 2018 and 2019. That kind of direct leader-to-leader diplomacy was very unusual in history of U.S.-North Korean relations. More recently, we also saw the signal that Trump might want to try again. For example, late last October, just before the APEC summit, Trump visited South Korea and said that he would be willing to meet Kim Jong-un if Kim reached out to him. At the time, Trump even said that he considered North Korea as sort of nuclear power. He also noted that U.S. still has sanctions in place, and that sanction could be an important starting point for negotiation. However, Kim Jong-un did not respond to that proposal at the time. So in practice, Trump's attempt to open a new dialogue did not lead to an immediate meeting. That said, Trump later explained the situation is a bit differently. He said that he had been very busy and that there was simply no opportunity to talk. But he also emphasized that he had built a very personal good relationship with Kim Jong-un and that he would be willing to try again. Interestingly, Kim Jong-un has also sent a somewhat positive signal. In speech at the Supreme People's Assembly last September, Kim said that he will personally has good memories of President Trump. In North Korean political language, that kind of expression usually suggests that Kim is at the least open to the possibility of meeting again. But the key question is timing. Whether such a meeting could happen in the near future is still very uncertain, especially because of the ongoing conflict involving Iran. In U.S. politics, Iran and North Korea are often compared because both are seen as the anti-U.S. states pursuing nuclear capability. If the United States responding very strongly to Iran, even to the point of military action, it may become politically difficult for Washington to take a much softer approach toward North Korea. So at this point, we probably need to want to wait and see how the broader international situation develops. Meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un is certainly possible, but whether it will happen soon remains uncertain.
Right. And with regard to Iran, Kelly, North Korea also recently acknowledged Iran's appointment of Mojtaba Khamenei as the new supreme leader. What exactly did it say, and what are the broader implications of North Korea's stance on the unrest in the Middle East?
Yeah, well, North Korea maybe feels like it has to respond to what's going on and put out a statement. I think the official language that was used was that they acknowledge the new supreme leader of Iran. And just to back up for a second, I mean, what's happening is that the United States has, assassinated or toppled the last leader and has suggested that they would seek out, taking out the next leader, and has also hit targets of people that they thought might have succeeded the last supreme leader. So we're looking at the United States appearing to attempt a real regime change in Iran. And for North Korea, that is something that is inherently threatening and worth putting out a statement on, right? So North Korea called the U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran, quote, illegal, and accused them of, quote, undermining the foundations of regional peace and security. Another quote they put out, they accused the United States and Israel of, undermining the political system and the territorial integrity of a country. I think those are kind of the two pole quotes from that statement, and that, I mean, just taking a step back, if you look at North Korea and what comes off to the West is like its obsession with its nuclear program, that nuclear program is really North Korea's ticket to sovereignty, to maintaining the Kim dynasty. It's its smoking gun, its threat so as to not be invaded, and it's very unlikely to abandon that, at least so far as history shows. So, of course, when you're looking at the United States invading Iran, in part, being justified by Iran's past, pursual of a nuclear program, it makes sense that North Korea would, put out a statement in support, if you will, of Iran, but also kind of hedging the line a little bit.
Right. Professor Park, earlier you spoke about the comparisons, the parallels drawn between North Korea and Iran. For the sake of some context, could you tell us a bit about the diplomatic relations between these two regimes, Iran and North Korea?
Well, the diplomatic relations between North Korea and Iran actually goes back quite a long time. The two countries established the formal diplomatic relations in 1973, but their relationship became much closer after the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran. From that point on, both countries shared a similar strategic position. They were strongly opposed to the United States and were often isolated from the international community. The relationship deepened, especially during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. At the time, Iran needed weapons. North Korea became an important supplier. Pyongyang sold Iran artillery, missiles, and other military equipment. One well-known example is the Scud missile, which North Korea exported to Iran, and Iran later developed into its own missile program, such as Shahab series. Since then, cooperation has continued mainly in the military and missile fields. Many experts believe the two countries have exchanged technology, engineers, and technical knowledge related to the ballistic missiles. This is why their relations often attract attention from the international community, especially regarding missile and nuclear proliferation issue. However, it is important to understand that this is not a traditional alliance like the NATO. The relationship is often described as pragmatic and transactional. They cooperate when it benefits them, particularly in the defense technology, but there are very limited economic, cultural, or ideological ties between the two societies.
Right, and speaking about their defense partnership, Kelly, the South China Morning Post says that Iran and North Korea are likely to revive missile and nuclear cooperation in light of the U.S.'s latest military campaign against Tehran. What appears to back this outlook?
Well, we're 3 weeks into this conflict, which is maybe longer than some people had originally suspected. I think in the very first days of the U.S. and Israeli strikes, there was talk about maybe it'll only last a couple of days. And then President Trump started signaling that he was looking for a more permanent regime change. And now we see the latest news is that he's trying to drag in U.S. allies to be a part of this conflict and the issue over the oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. And it's getting quite messy quite quickly, right? So this article in the South China Morning Post quotes some analysts on North Korea, Iran, U.S. Nuclear proliferation issues. And those analysts quoted, some of which are South Korean, seem to think that essentially this moment where the global order is continuing to be disrupted. I mean, it's no secret that President Trump is kind of a wild card in terms of foreign policy and that relations have been frayed even between the U.S. and its allies. And now we have this war unfolding where there are missiles, striking international hotels in Dubai, that in a time of total chaos and uncertainty, Iran might turn to North Korea and look for some kind of closer cooperation maybe than in the last few years. And North Korea may, out of its own interest for its own sovereignty or to make a statement against invading authoritarian nations, might actually cooperate. And so a lot of this has to do with there's a long suspected partnership in terms of missile technology being exchanged between North Korea and Iran, as well as some cooperation on uranium enrichment. And North Korea in recent years has been kind of an interesting nation in that it's been a bit more isolated than the pre-COVID era. And it's also invested a lot more in shows of force since COVID-19. And so these analysts were essentially suggesting that this might be actually an opportune time or just a time that necessitates a closer partnership between those two nations.
Right. And speaking about staying, of course, with partnership, Professor Park, there are some that say the Trump administration's military operation against Iran will ultimately push North Korea closer to China and Russia. Do you share this outlook? And if that is the case, how does this reality look to affect South Korea's and the U.S.'s efforts to engage North Korea?
Well, I think the war with Iran will definitely influence how North Korea sees its own security situation. In fact, I would expect North Korea to react in three main ways. First, North Korea will probably feel an even stronger need to strengthen its nuclear weapon programs. From Pyongyang's perspective, the lesson from the Iran situation is very simple. They will argue that Iran was attacked because it does not have nuclear weapons. So North Korea will likely use this war as justification to say our nuclear weapons are absolutely necessary for our survival. In other words, it could actually accelerate North Korea's nuclear development rather than slow it down. Second, somewhat paradoxically, this situation might also lower the threshold for U.S.-North Korean negotiations. Kim Jong-un must be watching the situation very carefully, and President Trump has shown that he can be very unpredictable, and the U.S. military operation against Iran, especially targeting of key leadership figures, will certainly make North Korea nervous. Also, Iran was attacked even while negotiations were ongoing. So if North Korea continued to refuse these talks completely, that could create additional pressure on Pyongyang as well. Because of that, Kim Jong-un may feel that continuing to reject Trump's offer for talk carries some risk. Interestingly, we already saw a small signal of this after the Iran strike. The North Korean foreign minister issued a statement, but the language was actually quite restrained. They avoided directly criticizing President Trump. Third, North Korea may try to strengthen cooperation with China and Russia. On the surface, this makes sense because the United States often describe China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea as part of broader anti-U.S. alignment. However, the Iran crisis also showed the limit of that cooperation. Even though the Iran does not relations with Russia and China, the level of practical support during this conflict has been quite limited. That means North Korea may realize that in the end, it cannot rely too much on other countries for its security.
Right, and hence it might come to the dialogue table with regard to talks between Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump, of course. All right, on that note, we'll end today's talk. Professor Park, as always, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
And Kelly here in the studio, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching and see you back here same time tomorrow.